Is Taylor Swift Past Her Prime, the most controversial album of her career so far. With the currently extremely mixed reception that the album is getting even from Swifties themselves, Taylor might be in the final act of her time as the biggest showgirl in the world. The Baltimore Ravens are the biggest disappointment of the 2025 NFL season. Imagine the reaction from fans across the world when this team has only one win 5 weeks into the season. What will you do when at the peak of your career, everything in your life comes crashing down? Welcome back to Behold Pop Culture, the show where we take a look at all the biggest moments that took place in culture over the last week and make sure that you're never missing out. This week has been one that we've been building up to for a few weeks now because the biggest album release of the year arrived. Taylor Swift's The Life of a Showgirl officially was released. After the world and myself have had a few days to absorb the album, it's time to officially ask, is Taylor Swift past the peak of her career? Is Taylor Swift past her prime? This is Taylor's 12th studio album, and some people claim that she's a once-in-a-generation songwriter. That's how she's risen to the point where this album is projected to sell 3 million first week copies. You don't accidentally get to a place where you're shattering records in that way. That perception of her abilities is why she's reached a level of financial success that few musicians have ever reached and maybe never will again. But for every great songwriter, at some point in their career, there will be a conflict between their ability to push themselves creatively and to see enormous commercial success for your music. Last week on the podcast, we got to speak about Doja Cat dealing with this same problem, with her new album V sacrificing some of that potential commercial success for more creative fulfillment. And in prophesized fashion, we're seeing that album is not doing as well commercially, but for the people who are enjoying it, they are loving the music that they're hearing. For Taylor Swift, whose music has been largely rooted in her failed relationships, she's now potentially the happiest she's ever been, and she's engaged for the first time in her life. The result of her being in that headspace is the most controversial album of her career so far. Taylor's magic in her songwriting has historically come in the form of illustrious confessions about her romances. That's why nearly all of the biggest songs that you can remember from her are about breakups. When you're in a happy and healthy relationship, the subject matter completely changes. On this album, we get a graphic description of her love life with Travis Kelce on the song Wood, a Charlie XCX diss song called Actually Romantic, and a song called Cancelled, where she's talking about accepting being with friends who are publicly controversial. The Life of a Showgirl is a beautiful moment not because it's a bona fide classic all-time album, but because the biggest artist in the world is unintentionally pointing the mirror back at the people who are listening to her music to ask, what do you want from your favorite artists? Do you actually want them in happy, healthy relationships making art about that? Or do you want them dealing with trials and tribulations that they can reflect on and in turn empower you through the challenges that you face in your life? In hip hop, there's a notorious fear of a sophomore slump because you get to use all of your life experiences up until the moment of your first album to tell those stories. But after you're successful, it doesn't sound the same for you to talk about those challenges that you faced earlier in your life. So there's less material for you to pull from. For Taylor Swift, she's rolled the dice multiple times on relationships that morphed into phenomenal content for her to write about, with the Swifties being able to point you to exactly which relationship each album is rooted in. When Travis Kelce isn't as riveting of a muse to write about, there's less content for Taylor to pull from. So what we get are the most interesting moments on the album being when she actually reflects on what life is like in the limelight, being a showgirl, talking about how Hollywood can turn the lights off on you at any moment. Sabrina Carpenter coming on the album as the only feature, and in her verse saying that Showgirls will always end up being left for dead. Yet the irony is profound, because with the currently extremely mixed reception that the album is getting even from Swifties themselves, Taylor might be in the final act of her time as the biggest showgirl in the world. How much longer do we have where Taylor Swift will be this omnipotent pop culture icon? When you go to the same job or talk to the same people every single day, it can be easy for you to become a self-reflecting shell of yourself. You can be trapped by other people's perception of you. Bob is a hard worker who enjoys sushi for lunch. Jessica is an intelligent, eloquent speaker who enjoys leading meetings. But behind the curtain, you have other hobbies, interests, and relationships that may never be reflected to the people around you. When you start to bring your full self into these spaces, it can be daunting because you don't know how people will receive seeing this whole new version of you, especially when they've only seen one side for a long period of time. Taylor is falling into the wrong end of that experience, as she might be locked into that hopeless romantic failed relationship space for how people perceive her, the type of music that people want to hear. And that's the life of a showgirl. Showgirls are only seen for the role that they're asked to play, not who they are behind the curtains. And once you show more of yourself, the business is liable to drop you in an instant. That poetic reflection right there is where Taylor should have leaned completely into on this album. So on the surface, I was a little underwhelmed by the music, especially with the grand aesthetic that she built around it. But more importantly and more interestingly than that, I see this as the biggest crossroads of Taylor Swift's career. Will the world let her open up to new content, new experiences, new perspectives to share? Or will she be doomed to the life and finale of so many showgirls before her, having the curtain close on someone else's terms? I look forward to seeing the next chapter of her story. And if more is revealed as Taylor continues to promote this album, I'll come back and share new reflections on what she's done. But in the sports world, a new chapter is written every single week. And this week was no different, as the NFL had multiple wild, outrageous storylines that came to fruition for week 5. The first was for the Baltimore Ravens, whose season has already come to an end. The Baltimore Ravens are the biggest disappointment of the 2025 NFL season. Coming into this year, expectations were through the roof. You have Lamar Jackson, arguably the best quarterback in the NFL, which already should guarantee you a playoff appearance. He then was surrounded by what some people believed was the best defense in the NFL, a top 5 running back in the NFL, not the best receivers, but multiple receivers that specifically fit his skill set, and a coach with one of the most decorated resumes in the league. As a 2-time MVP still in the prime of his career, the expectation for Lamar Jackson is a Super Bowl win every single year. And right now, he's never even been to a Super Bowl, let alone won one. When those are your expectations, imagine the reaction from fans across the world when this team has only one win 5 weeks into the season. Their playoff chances are virtually zero. Lamar Jackson is now injured, slated to miss multiple games, and the defense has enough injuries to fill a small hospital. This week, Baltimore got decimated by the Houston Texans, losing by 34 points, and this might be the fastest that I've seen a Super Bowl contending team's hopes and dreams go up in ashes this early into the season. Meanwhile, the defending Super Bowl champions finally met their match this year, losing to the Denver Broncos. Week after week, I kept expressing my concern that the way they were winning these games was not sustainable. And when they finally met a team that could stop their run game and they were forced to pass, Jalen Hurts unfortunately failed the test, and they went home with multiple questions to answer as a team. Coming into this game, reports were flying about their wide receivers complaining that they weren't passing the ball enough. You have 2 of the best receivers in the NFL on this team, and they were being reduced to 4 or 5 catches, no touchdowns, virtual decoys for their run game. Wide receivers tend to have some of the biggest egos of any position in football. So imagine what that's like, getting open every single play and looking back and never seeing the ball getting thrown your way. When you're winning, that sounds like a selfish complaint. When you're losing, now you have to ask the question, do we need to switch things up and change our strategy? They have the talent, but in the game of football, strategy can make or break how much having that talent actually matters. While the juggernaut that is the Philadelphia Eagles goes to regroup and show us what they changed next game, one of the worst teams in the NFL was responsible for the biggest collapse of the year. The Arizona Cardinals have been a middling team for several years now, and the expectation was for that to continue this season, with them being 2-2 heading into this week. The Tennessee Titans, on the other hand, have been terrible. They had the number 1 pick in the draft last year and took quarterback Cam Ward, a rookie who's now starting for them and has shown very few flashes of the ability necessary to save this team from the depths of despair. Which is why coming into this game, they had 0 wins. So the game went as it should. The Titans could not score. The Arizona Cardinals could, and all seemed to be normal in the world. And while it looked like the Cardinals could cruise to another win, they miraculously proceeded to make mistake after mistake after mistake. They had a 70-yard touchdown run that was wiped off the board because of slippery hands, causing the ball to fall out, be fumbled, and be given back to the Titans. Then with the Titans driving down the field, they had a chance to once again seal the game. The Cardinals were fumbling and bumbling and looked unfocused, and in the blink of an eye, you look up, and the Titans, with a few seconds left in the game, were able to kick a field goal to win and get their first win of the season. On the opposite end of the spectrum, the Seattle Seahawks and Tampa Bay Buccaneers had one of the biggest shootouts of the year. In this game, 7 consecutive touchdowns were scored, going back and forth from both teams. While there were less major implications based on the result of this particular game, the victors, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, are now 4-1. With their own set of injuries that they've been dealing with. As they continue to get healthier in the coming weeks, it's officially time to call the Tampa Bay Buccaneers legit Super Bowl contenders for this season. As the NFL season moves on, the MLB playoffs have entered full swing, with the wild card round concluding, and now every single team in the playoffs is in a series. The NBA is getting close to returning, with preseason games going on and media pictures flooding the internet. It's nearly that time of year where there's more sports going on than one person can handle. Speaking of sports, one of the most highly anticipated sports movies of the year was released this past weekend, called The Smashing Machine, which features Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson alongside award-winning actress Emily Blunt. This movie is a biopic following a few years in the life of mixed martial artist Mark Kerr, one of the innovators in the competitive world of mixed martial arts, whose legacy can be traced all the way to the massive brand that is the UFC today. Few celebrities have cemented as large of a brand as Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. He is a mainstay in film history for the action comedy genre, a box that he virtually never steps outside of. And like Taylor Swift, if you do want to break out of that box, you need to be meticulous about your strategy on how you plan to go about doing that. In this movie, Dwayne completely reimagined himself to become the man that is Mark Kerr. Whether it was the great prosthetics that morphed his face into an unrecognizable version of himself, or his will to be redefined as an actor in Hollywood, The Rock gave the performance of his life in this movie. What will you do when at the peak of your career, everything in your life comes crashing down? Mark Kerr was one of the first major superstars in the mixed martial arts world. He was dominant. Before today, where you see in the UFC, you get months to prepare for one fight, back in the late 90s and early 2000s, on one night you would fight multiple people back to back to back to see who was the best. And in that grueling setting, he would defeat his opponents back to back to back, with each match lasting a few minutes at best as he would dominate them on the ground. As flashy as those wins were alongside his decorated college career in wrestling, the reason this sports story was so interesting that it needed to become first a documentary and now a biopic movie connected to major actors is because he had this massive success in the fighting world while behind the scenes, his world was falling apart. He was dealing with addiction to painkillers, cognitive dissonance with his success, and anger issues that wore down his relationship with his girlfriend, who in the movie is played by Emily Blunt. This superhuman, invincible man was unraveling internally in Shakespearean fashion. His life became an emotionally chaotic tragedy about how greatness and brokenness can coexist in the same man. The Rock took up the challenge of honoring his legacy in a way where both him and Emily Blunt carried the film with their emotional performances. As I watched the movie, one major question stood out to me. Is all that success worth it if it costs you your relationships, your sanity, and your health? Mostly in exchange for the fame and wealth. Professional athletes face that question every single time they go to work, knowing that they're risking major damage to their bodies. But on a more relatable scale, how many late nights are you willing to work? How many early mornings are you willing to give? All to make your dreams come true. Chasing your goals is risky and it can break you like it did Mark Kerr. But highlighting stories like his is meant to show the importance of being mindful of your own health, relationships, and sanity on pursuit of making your dreams come true. The man who on the outside was only perceived as a smashing machine had his biggest fight inside of him. The Rock is going to get Academy Award winning attention for how well he portrayed these emotions. But the writing of the film might have sold it short of delivering the emotional punch needed to actually secure the win in these award races. Just like Taylor being boxed into being a hopeless romantic, like The Rock being boxed into the unshakable, charismatic action hero, and like Mark Kerr being boxed into just a smashing machine, there is always more when you take a look under the hood. And it takes special attention to make sure that you take care of that part of you, the part that the rest of the world may never get a chance to see. For Microsoft this week, they made a decision for the whole world to see, and the reception couldn't have possibly been any worse than it was. Microsoft delivered the kiss of death to their Xbox console when they announced that their Gamepass, their gaming streaming service where you can rent from their entire catalog of games and in some cases get new releases as soon as they come out, got a 50% increase to its top tier price. Xbox gamers were outraged. In the gaming world, there's an ongoing theme of console wars. Which device is the best one for a given cycle? You pit the Xbox against the PlayStation, against the Wii, Switch, Nintendo device of a given year. And usually the one that wins these wars are the ones that come out with the best exclusive games. But Xbox had a different play in mind for this cycle. Instead of hoping to put out the best exclusive games, which they haven't done the best job of, why don't we give the best value that you can find in gaming with our Game Pass? Instead of having the success of our console hinge on our best games, let's just give you all of them. If you don't like one, it'll be that easy for you to pick up another one that you might enjoy. So for a while, that costed $10 a month, and at the time, many people called it the best deal in gaming. Then it costed $20, and now it costs $30 a month, $360 for a year, in what has now strayed far away from what was the best deal in gaming. After this announcement, their website was crashing because there were so many people logging on to cancel their subscription. $360 translates to the cost of about 4 or 5 games that you can buy and actually own rather than renting until your subscription ends. And for many people who might not play more than 4 or 5 games in a given year, the value proposition wasn't adding up. It remains to be seen whether or not the Xbox Game Pass team will stick by their decision, as many people are asking, is this the end of Xbox actually competing in the console wars? As we await the answer to that question, we have come to the end of today's podcast. Thank you for listening. I appreciate you taking the time out. Taylor Swift's album is undoubtedly going to be the major talking point for pop culture in the weeks to come, and I'd love to hear what you think if you decide to go and listen to her for yourself. My first official newsletter is releasing this week, and you can find it on Substack at Behold Pop Culture. The link is in the description for this podcast, and I hope you have a great week. I'll talk to you next time. This is Behold Pop Culture.